Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was blessed by Femme Shinigami and Harem with Femme Kyuubi and Femme Shinigami Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Kaka-sensei can't help me then no one can, mumbled a short spiky blonde boy wearing an orange and blue track suit as he threw punches towards a wooden stump, keeping his punches at even speeds. Thud, thud, thud. All because Sasuke is an Uchiha and has a bloodline. Who cares, he's just another orphan with fancy eyes. Screamed the blonde-haired boy as he threw a punch that had cracked the piece of wood in front of him before slowly turning to his side and sliding down the wood towards the ground covered in grass. Why? Why is it only me who has nobody? Why is it always Naruto Uzumaki who gets the short stick? Why only me? Cried Naruto a bit as he wiped the tears away from his eyes as he huddled against the tree. Sniff. Maybe if I win the Chunin exams, Kakashi-sensei will train me, said Naruto to himself, reigniting his spirit. Jumping to his feet, Naruto began to stretch. Yeah, that's it. Maybe if I win the Chunin exams, Kakashi-sensei will train me more than Sasuke. Thought Naruto as he was getting into position to run. Gurgle. Naruto's sweat dropped while he looked at his stomach. The thing acted like it had a mind of its own. Ah damn it. I'm hungry but I can't stop training, said Naruto to himself as he started to think of different options. He could just quickly run over to Ichiraku's and then run back. Or he could just ignore his stomach and continue training. After all, he had a month to train starting tomorrow. Naruto looked down. If only he could be in two places at once. At that moment a magical lightbulb appeared over Naruto's head. Naruto slammed a clenched fist into his other opened hand. Yes. Kujibushin. How could I forget that? Screamed Naruto as he placed his hands into the seal to summon his favorite technique. Well, second is sexy technique was just brilliant. Poof. Soon the small clearing was filled with hundreds of Narutos. Naruto looked around himself before sighing. Ever since the Forest of Death and Orochipido touched him in the stomach he hasn't been able to use his chakra any good. Okay everyone, but one clone dispel please, said Naruto as he rubbed his forehead with his hand. Poof. Soon there was only one clone that was in a saluting position. Sir, yes sir, said the clone looking like an Anbu does when talking to the Hokage. Naruto grinned. Clone Naruto. This is an important mission. You must get me 10 miso ramens and pronto. Failure will result in my stomach exploding and we never getting to taste ramen again, said Naruto as he pointed at his clone, which had a look of fear. Sir, yes sir, screamed the clone as he dashed away, leaving Naruto all by himself in the clearing. Naruto looked at the dust cloud the clone had left and scratched his head. How was the clone going to pay for the ramen? Oh well, he will see when the clone comes back. Naruto looked back at his training ground. He had found the place before the graduation exam and hang out here from time to time. It was a massive clearing that held heaps of trees around it along with a decent-sized waterfall at the edge of the clearing. Naruto started to go back into his running position, mentally counting down from 3. 3, 2, 1, go. Screamed Naruto from within his own conscience as he forced his body to move as fast as he could, which was pretty fast for a genin. He seemed to be just at an experienced genin's speed, which was just under a rookie chunin's. Come on Naruto. You can go faster. You can do better. Screamed Naruto as he tried to force his muscles more and continued running, which actually made him go slightly faster. This continued for a few minutes before Naruto suddenly tripped and grabbed his head. Ouch. What the hell was that? Said Naruto, starting off in a loud voice which slowly had become quiet as he slowly started to forget about his newly scrapped knee and slowly remembered him rushing to Ichiraku's before Ayame giving him a bowl for free as he forgot his money and then him rushing out of Ichiraku's and then barreling into a crate full of kunai and then popping. Naruto started to panic and look himself over before realizing something. He didn't do that. That was his clone. Did he just remember what his clone did? I thought that Kujibushin was only a physical clone. I need to read the rest of the technique information, mumbled Naruto to himself as he only looked at how to make the technique and not what it did, well except for making clones that could hit people. I'll just ask Gigi now instead, said Naruto as he left his special clearing towards the Hokage Tower, on the other side of the village. 3 hours later. I should have just run here, muttered Naruto as it was now late evening. He walked up the stairs towards the cage tower. Looking up towards the top he saw his Gigi. But before Naruto could call out to him he disappeared. Well, looks like it was time for Operation FS. Well, it looks like I will need Operation Forbidden Scroll after all, said Naruto as he sighed a bit. Continuing his walk he went towards his objective. Walking around to the back of the Hokage Tower, Naruto's sweat dropped. The construction setup was still there which he had used to sneak in the first time, and so was the same window at the very top. Gigi was defiantly too old to be Hokage if he lets his ninjas forget the windows. Naruto saw the ledge that he had to grab and saw the ramp still there. Naruto once again got into a running position before sprinting up the ramp and launching him up and grabbing the ledge. Twisting his body around a bit he saw the next platform he had to land on. Placing his feet on the rocky surface, he pushed against it while jumping towards the platform to make sure he didn't underjump it. Tucking into a ball position, Naruto rolled against the platform before coming to a stop right in the middle of the platform. Standing up, Naruto looked at the window that was right next to him. Poking his head in and moving it left and right, Naruto slowly entered the building, making sure to avoid the chattering of other shinobi within the building. Walking up to the Hokage's office, Naruto sent a hand inside of his orange jacket and pulled a key that he had. The key was special as it was a direct copy of the key his Gigi had, even down to the squiggly lines that adorn it. Placing the key into the keyhole, he slowly twisted it and quietly opened the door, quickly shutting it as quietly as he could. He quietly moved across the room towards the massive bookcase that held a lot of village secrets. Naruto, with key in hand, opened the bottom drawer and saw a keyhole near the back. Doing what he had done to the door, Naruto quietly twisted the key once he placed it inside the keyhole. Clink. Taking the key out, he watched as a hidden drawer appeared from the back of the bookcase. Inside was the Forbidden Scroll along with 3 scrolls with his name on it. While he knew that this was a new hiding place of the Forbidden Scroll, he was shocked that there were 3 scrolls addressed to him. Shrugging, he grabbed the 3 scrolls and placed them in his orange jacket. Grabbing the Forbidden Scroll, he quickly opened it up and fully read what the Kujibushin did. He was amazed that he didn't read this when he could have. His Kujibushin could be used for training. Well, for anything other than physical training. In the scroll it said that the technique was created by the second Hokage, Tobirama Senju, for spying technique, as you could send a Kujibushin to scout out an area before going in yourself. The reason this was a good espionage technique was because of the memory share, which lets the user gain all the memories from his Kage-bushins when they dispelled. Although Naruto wouldn't have come to the training conclusion if he hadn't read that it could also be used for training and studying. Naruto was giddy. He could actually one-up Sasuke. Sure, while the Tem could copy any ninjentai, he couldn't actually learn the ins and outs of the technique. He could learn anything in a matter of hours. While Naruto was in his inner monologue, he hadn't read the caution section. Yes, yes, yes. I'm going to be the best ever Hokage, said Naruto as he jumped up to his feet, scratching the back of his right hand which had drawn blood. Gah, said Naruto as he dropped the Forbidden Scroll and threw his hand wildly, spraying blood over the Hokage's portraits due to the shock of being cut. Naruto caught his right hand in a tight grip as he watched the blood he threw on the Hokages start to disappear. Well, all the Hokages except for Gigi's. Poof. Thud. 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 Naruto looked at the 3 scrolls that had popped out of the now clean portraits. Looking down towards the scrolls, he saw that they were each meant for someone who had their blood. But how did he get the scrolls then? He was sure he wasn't Senju or Namikaze. So, how did he open the secret portraits? Leaning down towards the scrolls, he quickly placed the 3 scrolls into his jacket. Quickly gazing at some of the recorded techniques, he got interested in a few of them. The first was the Rasengan, which the steps made it easy to understand, however, if it was in the forbidden scroll, it must be hard to learn. Another one was the Hiraishin no Jutsu, however, it commented how you needed a high knowledge of Fuin Jutsu to even try to think of how to create a similar technique to the Hiraishin, as the steps weren't written down. The next one was called Edo Tensai, and it revived dead shinobi for a little bit if the user had some of their blood for the summoning and if there was a body for them to inhabit. Those were the only ones who actually interested him. Sure, the Infinite Darkness Genjutsu sounded cool, but since people said he had bad chakra control, he couldn't use Genjutsu to save his life. Seeing as how he got what he wanted, Naruto pulled out a notepad that he always carried with him for pranking ideas. Quickly flipping pages of the little notebook, which was nearly full, he wrote down the steps to the Rasengan, Hiraishin and Edo Tensai. Okay, Naruto, almost there. Just got to place the scroll back and get out of here, said Naruto to himself as he could feel his heartbeat going full pelt as he placed the forbidden scroll back into its place and locked the secret cupboard. Standing up, Naruto quickly wiped the blood of his Gigi's portrait and used his ki to open the door slowly and walking out quietly. Closing the door behind him, Naruto moved throughout the building towards the open window. Climbing through the window, Naruto slowly walked across the platform and jumped to the ledge before dropping down to the ramp, which he slid from. Naruto gripped his heart as he finally got out of the building, not alerting any ninjas within. Thank Kami that Gigi took his Anbu with him, or I would have been caught instantly, said Naruto to himself as he started to walk towards the steps that would lead him to Konoha. Hour later. Ah, god damn it, those steps take forever to climb, muttered Naruto to himself as he was walking with his hands behind his head as he was walking towards his apartment. Maybe he should just go sleep at his training ground. He did have a makeshift house there, and if he was always there, he would be able to train day in and day out. Agreeing that would be the best idea, Naruto headed towards his apartment to leave a note for his Gigi to find later on. Naruto's apartment. Opening his door with his key, Naruto turned on the lights and walked through his small apartment and walked into his room. Looking for his travel bag, he quickly opened it and pushed in some of his jumpsuits and some ramen preserves. Going under the bed, he pulled out a loose floor board that held some of his hidden supplies. In the small hidden compartment were blood pills, chakra pills and food pills. Each was self-explanatory. Blood pills made your body produce more blood so that if you start bleeding badly you could survive a little longer than normal, although it puts a huge stress on your body later on. The chakra pills replenished your chakra, however each time you take it, and it increases the fatigue you will feel and the chakra exhaustion when you stop taking the pills after each time you run out of chakra. The food pills just filled you up for a few hours, although it doesn't give you the nutrition that regular food gives. Next to the supply of pills was his hidden money box, which held hundreds of thousands of yen, which he had saved up from since his young years. Along with the box of money was his fox mask. He didn't know why he had chosen that mask as a child, but it just seemed right at the time. Picking up the mask, he held it to his face and walked towards the bathroom and looked himself in the mirror. He tried to hide it, but it looked right on him for some reason. Throwing his Fox Anbu mask into his travel bag, he went back under the floorboard and grabbed his large supply of medical equipment, which was sealed in a scroll. He threw it into the bag as well. The reason for this is when Naruto was smaller, he used to patch up animals he found in the forests around or in Konoha, which eventually led him to learning some medical things for both animals and humans. It was kind of a hobby of Naruto's. Seeing as he was done moving his items, he closed the bag before standing up and walking towards his apartment's entrance. Turning off the light as he walked past, he closed the door behind him and locked it. Naruto started to walk towards the training grounds, making the passing ninjas think that he was going to train at one of the regular training grounds. Walking past all the training grounds, he started to sprint towards his secret place. With an hour of sprinting, Naruto finally reached his secret training ground. Well, I might as well sleep now as it's becoming dark, said Naruto as he looked towards the sky, which had just started to show some stars above. 8 hours later. Yawn. Why did I have to wake myself up so early? Groaned Naruto as he fell of his handmade hammock hidden within the cave behind the waterfall. Naruto looked at himself and shuffled his jacket a little and felt all the scrolls he still had on him. Well, it's a good time to read them, I guess, Naruto thought as he walked around the ice-cold waterfall. Walking towards the center of the clearing, Naruto placed all the scrolls in front of him in 2 piles. The ones on his left were the ones that fell from the Hokage's portraits, while the ones on the right were the ones which were with the forbidden scroll. Naruto scratched his head with his right hand, wondering which one he should open first. Well, the Hokages were his heroes, and he could always read the other ones after. So grabbing the 3 Hokage scrolls, Naruto tried to open them, only for them not to budge. What? But these fell from the floor when my blood. Oh right, I might need my blood to open it, said Naruto as he slapped his forehead for forgetting. But before doing that, Naruto placed his hands into the Kujibushin hand sign. Kujibushin no Jutsu. After the shout, multiple puffs of smoke could be heard. Naruto looked at his small army of 200 clones with a nod. Okay guys, everyone go on to tree walking training, okay? Kaka-sensei told me that my chakra control is the worst, so we should work on that for now, said Naruto. He watched his clones nod before going towards a separate tree and began the tree walking exercise. Naruto then looked back at the scrolls with his heart pounding within his chest. Slowly bringing his right hand up towards his mouth, he sent some chakra into his canine tooth and bit his thumb. He quickly drizzled the scrolls in his blood before the wound healed itself. Suddenly 3 puffs sounded off, and what appeared shocked Naruto to his core. The 3 dead Hokage. The first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. The second Hokage, and Hashirama's brother Tobirama Senju. And finally his personal favorite out of all the Hokages. The fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze. 3 living legends stood in front of Naruto, and he could not believe it, before his mind popped up and thought of something. Ah, ghosts! Screamed Naruto as he dived into the lake head first, which brought a sweat drop from the 4th Hokage for some reason. The Kages looked at each other before looking at the scrolls on the ground, and was shocked that all 3 of them appeared. Especially Minato, as he was sure that if his scroll was used, Naruto would only be able to use his. He wasn't expecting him to be able to summon the 1st and 2nd Hokage, but that means that Naruto was related to the first 2 Kage. While Minato was in his inner monologue, Tobirama was getting annoyed with his direct family member hiding from them in the lake. So he used his water manipulation to summon a water whip and dragged Naruto out of the lake. Naruto was shitting himself now. He was certain they were ghosts. Even if they weren't see-through, or if they were able to use ninjutsu. Naruto soon found himself suspended off the ground by the 2nd Hokage's water whip. Hashirama, who had been quiet since being summoned, smiled at Naruto and gave a little wave. Hi there, I guess since you were able to summon me, Tobirama, and who are you? Asked Hashirama with a question mark above his head as he looked at Minato, who looked shocked for a bit before scratching his head in embarrassment. Oh right, never met. My name's Minato Namikaze, 4th Hokage, said Minato as he turned his back to Hashirama and Tobirama, showing his Hidori to them both, along with Naruto, who was having a fanboy moment. Who cares if they were ghost? That was one cool Hidori and pose. Hashirama seemed to nod before he realized something. Okay, if you're the 4th Hokage and you're dead, then who is the 5th? Asked Hashirama with his head tilted a bit, while Tobirama simply rose an eyebrow, also wondering who. Minato scratched his head as he actually didn't know, however he was saved by Naruto. Gigi's the Hokage, said Naruto with his arms folded as he was still suspended midair and upside down. Hashirama looked at Naruto and asked who this, Gigi, was. Naruto looked confused at how Hashirama didn't know who Gigi was, but then again he forgot that not everyone knew that he could the 3rd Hokage, Granddad. Oh, he's the third Hokage, and even though he's an old man, he's still cool, said Naruto as he was slightly starting to feel all the blood going to his head and giving him a headache. Looking towards the second Hokage, Naruto asked him to let him down, which the second Hokage thought of for a bit, before reluctantly letting the boy go, only to watch as Naruto fell head first into the ground. Ow! What the hell was that for Dadbao? Said Naruto, letting his verbal tick pop up by accident. For some strange reason, the fourth Hokage smiled at his verbal tick. Tobirama looked at Naruto for a bit before turning to his brother. He's from your side of the family, said Tobirama, making Hashirama laugh along with Minato. Naruto just watched as two of the three Kage laughed a bit before getting annoyed. Hey, can you please tell me how you are alive? Asked Naruto as he pointed towards the Kages, who nodded their heads. Hashirama stepped forward as he began to explain. Okay, so as you see, you managed to release us three from the three scrolls in front of you, which means you are related to us, either by your father or your mother, said Hashirama as he stepped back and watched as Tobirama moved forward. In basic sense, you are blood family. As such, we had created these scrolls for our family if they needed help in any situation, so why did you summon us? Asked Tobirama as he watched Naruto scratch his head a bit. Well, I kind of accidentally found these scrolls when I went to see what the Kujibushin really did, said Naruto, grinning a bit before seeing shock appear on the second Hokage's face. Tobirama moved forward along with the other Kages, which made Naruto somewhat have some fear wash over him. Tobirama looked him dead in the eye. Why would you need to know what the Kujibushin does? You shouldn't be able to even attempt it with your currently low levels of chakra and lack of control, said Tobirama as he saw Naruto look at him confused before pointing at the general direction of his clones. When the previous Hokage saw the amount of clones there were, they panicked. Naruto, dispel your clones one at a. Tobirama was cut off by the sounds of hundreds of puffs. All the Kage looked at Naruto, expecting to be on the floor dead from all the strain of the Kage Bushins exploding at the same times and Naruto experiencing their collective memories. Naruto just stared at the three Kage with his head tilted. He didn't feel anything other than a better sense of control over his chakra, which for some reason made him more relaxed instead of more hyper. What? Asked Naruto as he looked at the shocked faces of all the Kage in front of him. How? Mumbled Tobirama as he watched Naruto stand like he wasn't affected by the strain of the Kage Bushins. Hashirama simply grinned. If Naruto was able to survive that and not feel a thing, he could be the next Kami no Shinobi in a few years. Minato smiled proudly. His son was as tough as diamonds if he could survive that. And look like it didn't bother him. Tobirama soon got over his shock. Well, it seems that training you for the next month will be quite entertaining, said Tobirama with a grin stretching across his face, which was mirrored by the other Kage. Naruto suddenly felt like he was walking into hell. Faster, Naruto! Screamed Minato as he threw his Hiraishin kunai towards Naruto, who was running on nothing but fumes. It has been 10 days since Naruto's training had begun, and the Kages were impressed at Naruto's learning rate even without the clones helping him with nearly everything. When the Kages first began training Naruto, they noticed that he didn't have any survivor skills. They found this out when they sent him to get some food for himself, as they were nothing but upgraded Kujibushin, as Naruto learned after their first meeting. The Kages waited for half an hour before finding Naruto battling three grizzly bears that were a few miles out from their location. How did Naruto get a few miles away while looking for food? They will never know. When Tobirama had asked Naruto who taught him all he knew, the small child had instantly fell silent and only murmured his answers. When the Kages heard his answers, the first two Hokage only felt sympathy towards the child. However, the fourth Hokage went to his knees and hugged the boy and silently cried. When Naruto asked why he was crying, Minato explained to him about him being Naruto's father and about how his wife should have been there to look after him, unless she was also dead. All through the night Naruto wept as the three Kage watched him overcome his grief and sadness of the chance of never meeting his mother, although at least he met his father, kinda. On the second day of training, Tobirama had made Naruto summon as much clones as he could as the day before, only to be able to summon 50 Kage Bushins when using the same amount of chakra he had used the previous day. That day's experience gave Naruto something else to work along with everything else he was training in. Flashback 9 days ago. Gra. Why can't I summon how many clones I want? I know my control was heaps better than yesterday. Even if it was only like 15 minutes worth of chakra control. Said Naruto loudly as he continued trying to summon 200 clones like the day before, but no matter what he wasn't able to summon over 100 clones at max. While Naruto was continuously trying to re-summon 200 clones, Tobirama was sitting in a relaxed stance and was feeling out Naruto's chakra for any anomaly that was preventing him from using his chakra properly. Tobirama sensed how Naruto's chakra would emerge from his stomach and noticed something. His chakra was being scrambled from his core. Standing up, Tobirama called Hashirama and Minato towards him and Naruto, who had taken to sitting down onto the ground after another failed attempt. Tobirama looked at Naruto for a bit before lifting his jacket and shirt up, exposing his stomach to the 3 cages. For Hashirama, he had no clue what he was looking at. Sure, his wife Mito had taught him some sealing, but he had always fallen asleep during her lectures. For Tobirama, it was an ingenious seal that would disrupt a person's chakra and if they were a Jinchuriki, would block them from accessing their tailed beast's energy. However, since it was new to Tobirama, it would take him a while to learn the counter seal for it. However, for Minato it was simple. Moving his hand towards Naruto's stomach, he placed his hand on the 5-prong seal and slowly twisted the seal open. However, Minato noticed a seal behind the 5-prong seal, and if he was correct, it was a bloodline blocking seal, used when a child gains an ability that no one wants them to know about. The only ones who knew that technique were the clan heads and the Hokage, probably Danzo as well. Naruto, I am going to unseal your chakra and another seal that shouldn't be on you, okay? Said Minato looking straight at Naruto's eyes, who gave him a nod in return. With all the insurance he needed, he quickly spun his hand counterclockwise and broke both seals that had taken place on Naruto's stomach. After making sure that the Kyuubi's seal was not harmed, he went to the other cages. Naruto just watched as he could feel his chakra getting back to normal, along with noticing that his whisker marks disappeared from his face while looking at a puddle next to him. He watched as the cages all sent glances at him through most of their conversation. Deciding to relax a bit, Naruto laid down and closed his eyes, only to be able to somehow see the 3 cages in a sort of mind map. While he was looking through his mind map, he watched as the cage moved towards him before they held something out to him. Naruto opened his eyes and saw a blank piece of paper being held above him. Turning his eyes to the cage, Hashirama started to explain. Okay, Naruto. The paper in front of your face is called chakra paper. Chakra paper comes from trees that are fed chakra over a prolonged amount of time and can identify someone's chakra type when the person inserts their own chakra into the paper. So all we need you to do is send some chakra into the paper and see your elements. Said Hashirama as he watched as Naruto took the paper out of his hand. The cages watched in anticipation as Naruto used a bit of his chakra and placed it within the special paper. Soon the paper split into 3 separate pieces. The first piece was completely covered in water. The second piece had turned into pure dirt, and the third piece was zapping the entire paper and making it close up into a ball. The cages just watched as Naruto had 4 elements: wind, water, earth and lightning. But before any of them could tell Naruto what his elements were, the water and earth pieces slipped through Naruto's fingers and fell to the ground, where they merged into a small plant. At this, Hashirama just jumped with joy. He finally had someone to pass his teachings on to. However, he could only do it for 30 days. Present. Naruto, you can do better. Said Minato as he teleported around the clearing and threw more kunai at Naruto as he was also dodging small water dragons and wood dragons. Naruto looked at all his teachers with evil eyes as he continued to dodge all the attacks his senseis had thrown at him. Naruto had looked back at how this training helped him. Hashirama, Minato and Tobirama had made his clones train in elemental manipulation for all his elements, which was around 50 clones per group. Then Hashirama's medical training, which Naruto enjoyed very much. Tobirama's chakra control training, which had him soaked to the bone as he had to do waterfall climbing while carrying the 3 pervious cage on his back, which annoyed the hell out of him. Then his 2 Sans Taijutsu training, which actually fit him. Then were Fuinjutsu lessons between Tobirama and Minato along with slight insight into space-time ninjutsu, his now new favorite subject. Because of those training sessions he had been able to rise from solid genin to mid-chunin in skills. Experience. About mid-genin, this brought his overall stats to about high genin. Naruto watched as he continued to dodge all his sensei's attacks and slowly a grin formed on his face. He would so kick Neji's Chunin exam finals stadium. Everyone there for the Chunin exams was abuzz. They Chunin exams were held every 6 months in each hidden village so that the cages could show off their up-and-coming shinobi to future employers and future enemies. The third Hokage gave a sigh. It had been 1 whole month since he had seen Naruto Uzumaki and he was getting worried. He had arranged Jiraiya meet him and train him for the Chunin exams when he heard that Kakashi was training the Uchiha, but alas Jiraiya didn't want to and now Naruto probably stood no chance. Hiruzen looked up and saw that everyone was getting restless. He would need to start the Chunin exams soon or people would become angry and it would affect Konoha badly. Looking towards the contestants he saw that there was only 6 in total standing there. The 3 genin missing were Naruto, Sasuke and Dosu from Sound. If Sasuke was to come late people would force him into giving the Uchiha more time to appear, but if Naruto was late by even a nanosecond he would be disqualified. Hiruzen sighed. It looked like Naruto wouldn't be able to try gain position of Chunin. Walking towards the edge of the balcony and putting a face on as he noticed the cage enter the cage booth with his 2 guards, he called out towards the fans. The Chunin exams will now begin. Screamed Hiruzen as he watched the crowd go wild from his proclaim. Walking back a bit, he sat down on his chair waiting for the fights. Soon the protector of the Chunin exams walked in front of the group of genin. The man had shoulder-length hair which hanged around his face and brown eyes. The most noticeable thing was that he wore his forehead protector like a bandana and he had a senbon in his mouth. His clothing was just the general Jonin uniform. Genma lazily looked around before nodding to himself. All genin except for Naruto Uzumaki and Neji Hyuga go to the waiting area, said Genma as he watched most of the genin walk off except for Neji. Neji had black hair that was tied up into a loose ponytail which had reached mid-back. Neji wore a black forehead protector that he wore snugly over his forehead. He wore a khaki shirt, under which he wore a dull blue shirt with mesh armor underneath it, dark brown shorts, and blue shinobi sandals. He also had bandages wrapped around his right arm, chest, and right leg. Neji stood with his arms crossed for a few seconds before smirking. The fool Naruto probably ran or died during the month break. Genma looked around and couldn't see the blonde boy anywhere, so with a sigh he went to call Neji the winner. Winner due to disqualification Neji, Genma was cut off from when a kunai landed in front of his feet. Moving his eyes into the direction of where the kunai had come from, he had noticed a lone figure standing on top of the cage box. The figure looked like a Jonin with an Anbu mask. The figure wore the standard Jonin uniform, although without the Chunin flat jacket, as he noticed it hadn't held the Uzumaki emblem on the back. But what Genma noticed about the Anbu mask was which animal it represented. He knew from some colleagues that no one would even think of wearing that type of mask. It was a fox mask. Soon the figure free fell from the cage box roof and landed in a slight crouch with nearly without any sound coming from the impact. Genma looked at the man for a bit before noticing the blonde hair, then he grinned. "Are you Naruto Uzumaki?" asked Genma as he watched as the now named Naruto tilt his head a bit. "What gave me away?" asked Naruto as he removed his mask and secured it to his hip via belt. Genma just looked at the kid and smirked. Walking back towards the center of the arena, he stood in between the two genin. Raising his hand up, he looked at both sides and then brought his hand down. Fight. Both contestants looked at each other, not moving a muscle as a light wind ruffled their hair, even when their fight was started. Naruto looked at Neji with nothing but a blank face as he moved his arms up to his chest and wrapped them up, confusing Neji before he shrugged it off and began to give his opponent some verbal abuse. You know, changing your cloths won't do anything, dead last. Fate has chosen me to win this fight. After all, who would support a worthless nobody peasant, said Neji as he smirked, waiting for Naruto's outburst. However, it was only silence, before Naruto spoke a few words. At least I'm not a slave, said Naruto in a whisper that somehow reached everyone's ears, especially Neji's, who had started to see blood. What? Did you say, peasant? Muttered Neji as he clenched and unclenched his hands as he formed them into tight fists before releasing them and repeating the process. Naruto looked at him straight in his eyes before saying the words he had not spoken just moments ago. At least I'm not a slave, said Naruto in a louder voice as he watched Neji tense his legs, before sprinting at him. Only to fall down to his knees while holding his stomach. Seems his attack worked. Walking up to Neji, he quickly sent some strikes to his shoulders and back before standing back a little and admiring his work. Neji couldn't believe what had happened. He started to run, only to feel his head swim along with his stomach, feeling like someone was piercing it with a kunai. Next thing he knew was Naruto stopping his arms from moving along with his legs. Looking up towards Naruto, he gnashed his teeth as he stared into Naruto's eyes. How did you beat me? Asked Neji as medic nins rushed towards his location ready to pick him up and take him towards the medical booth near the genin stand. Naruto just looked at him for a moment, before turning towards the genin stand, leaving Neji clueless about how he was defeated. Neji just looked at Naruto's back with anger. How dare this peasant do this to him? Trying to get up, Neji then felt all the muscles of his arms rip. Ah! Screamed Neji as he fell back onto the floor with his head down, showing he was completely knocked out. The crowd was silent as Naruto walked back towards the stand, before Ayame stood up from the stand and screamed. Yes, Naruto-kun. We made over 1,000,000 yen. Screamed Ayame as she and her father had betted on Naruto winning, and with the odds at 1.5 Neji and 1,000 Naruto, anyone who picked Naruto to win would have quite a bit of cash to spend. Naruto stopped walking and looked towards Ayame, and gave a grin and thumbs up, before continuing towards the genin box. Cage booth. The third Hokage stared in shock. His unofficial grandson defeated the Hyuga prodigy in 30 seconds, all without moving his body once until Neji suddenly fell over and was in pain. How did Naruto do that? The Kage was in a similar state of wondering. He had not noticed anything before or after the Hyuga fell. The Kage turned towards the Hokage with his eyes narrowing. What did the blonde child do, Hokage Dono? Asked the Kage with genuine curiosity. The third Hokage just looked at the arena for a bit before shaking his head a bit. I do not know, Kage Dono, I simply do not know, replied the Hokage as he watched Neji Hyuga being carried away towards the medical box. Genin area. As Naruto walked up towards the participants' booth, he saw many look at him in shock, which Naruto understood why, as it was very unlikely that a dead last would beat a prodigy in only 30 seconds. Getting rid of his blank face and replacing it with a grin and wave, he greeted his comrades. Another thing his teachers taught. Friends are people who like to be around you for you, and not because they look at you and get an ego boost from your graduation position, along with actually hanging out with you for no other reason other than to hang out. Comrades were people you knew better than most, but had not become friends with them. When Naruto looked at it like that, he remembered all the times Kiba, Ino, Sakura no just Sakura, and Sasuke had walked up to him, just to give him insults. Hey everyone, how's it going? Asked Naruto as he walked over towards the balcony and started to lean against it. Now everyone in the participant area was shocked. Naruto Uzumaki didn't scream in greeting, and wasn't acting like he was 30 days ago. Shikamaru just looked at Naruto closely with a thoughtful gaze for a bit, before shrugging it off as it being too troublesome to figure out why Naruto was like that. Arena. Genma just shook his head at the very short fight. He did notice something off about the wind, but it was probably just his imagination. Okay, will the participants Sasuke Uchiha and Gaara of the Sand please step forward? Said Genma with a loud voice to get over the talking of the crowd. Only for the crowd to start to cheer very loudly as they waited for Sasuke. 30 seconds later Genma looked towards the Hokage on what to do as Sasuke did not appear. Cage booth. Well, it seems that Sasuke inherited Kakashi's lateness, it seems he will be disqualified, muttered the Hokage as he began walking towards the balcony to announce Sasuke's forfeit, however the cage thought otherwise. Wait, Hokage Dono. Many people turned up to watch Sasuke Uchiha and my son Gaara to fight. Maybe you could give them more time? Asked the cage in a polite tone, which the Hokage began to think about. While unfair to other competitors, it would at least give the audience something to wait on. Fine, I will move his match to the last one before disqualifying him, said the Hokage as he stood at the edge of the balcony. Civilians and all, Sasuke Uchiha's match and Gaara of the Sand will be moved into the last fight of the first round, said the Hokage, getting cheers of joy from the entire crowd. As he walked back and sat down, he could hear a voice yelling in the distance, seemed like Naruto did still act like himself. Participant booth. Damn it, Gigi. Why are you letting that have more of a benefit? Screamed Naruto up towards the cage booth while shaking his fist at the area he knew his Gigi was, only to get everyone on the crowd stare at him. What? That gets everything handed to him. Not my fault, I speak the truth, said Naruto as he crossed his arms and became quiet again. Arena. Genma was smirking, although he would have been laughing if he wasn't the protector of the fight. Naruto sure could make nearly anything laughable. Genma looked towards the Genin booth and called out the two next competitors. Will Shikamaru Nara and Tamari of the Sand please come forth, said Genma, pointing towards the center only to hear someone surrender. Genin booth. I surrender, said Shikamaru as he shook his head, muttering, troublesome. There was no way he would be able to defeat a wind user without the field being damaged, or without the right equipment. Naruto just nodded his head. Shikamaru's clan was strategists, and if it didn't look like he could win, the best choice is to surrender. Although he was going to push Shikamaru in, that would be endangering a comrade, something Naruto would never do. Arena. Genma started to laugh a bit. It seemed like Sasuke's time was running out. Shrugging, Genma called out the next two competitors, only to hear one of them surrenders. Genin booth. Yes, I keep changing what the name of the participants both is, sorry. I surrender, said Kankuro as he couldn't show Crow off until the invasion. Arena. Genma was busting his gut. All the fights were short, and the only one to fight was Naruto and Neji, but Naruto didn't even move until the end of that, seemed like Sasuke wouldn't get to fight. Cage booth. The cage was seething. Now there was no choice but to disqualify Sasuke. Damn you, Kakashi, and your lateness, thought the cage as he looked at the Hokage moving towards the balcony. The Hokage was grinning slightly. It seemed that Sasuke was going to be disqualified. Due to Sasuke not appearing, he is now disqualified. Now on to the next match, Naruto Uzumaki vs Gaara of the Sand. However, since the Sasuke and Gaara fight never happened, we will allow a 5-minute break for placing bets, said the Hokage as he walked back towards his chair and sat down with his hands covering his grin. Genin booth. Naruto was excited. He was going to fight and actually test his skills against Gaara, unless he falls like Neji did. Ha ha ha, this is going to be fun, said Naruto as he started to hop on the balls of his feet in preparation of his entrance, before he stopped jumping and took a breath to calm down. And if like a switch, Naruto's face became blank. As he heard Genma say the 5 minutes is over, he jumped onto the field. Arena. Genma looked at the two ninja as they stared at each other with blank faces and in their ready stances. Genma nodded to himself, ready to step in if Gaara attempts to kill Naruto. Raising his hand up, he looked at both competitors for a bit, before throwing his hand down and jumping away. Fight. Naruto looked at Gaara for a bit, before noticing his attack had hit, but didn't work. That meant that Gaara was either had an immune system that could purge him of nearly anything, or he was a Jinchuriki like he was. Looks like if things get out of hand he will have to use his gifter seals. Naruto leaned forward slightly before tensing his muscles. Feeding a slight amount of chakra to his body he dashed. Slam. Naruto stood where Gaara previously stood with his fist in a punching position. Following the direction of his fist, it led to a large hole in the side of the arena. Naruto closed his eyes briefly, searching for Gaara's chakra signature and seeing how it was flowing. It was flowing rapidly. He was angry. Naruto opened his eyes once again and dashed back towards his original starting position. He watched as Gaara moved out of the hole in the wall and stared at him with anger, before smiling maniacally towards Naruto. "Yes, you will prove my existence," said Gaara loud enough so that the crowd could hear him. Naruto just stared at the redhead in front of him. He was a Jinchuriki, however he had to make sure as there have been bloodlines for nearly every element. Naruto placed his hands behind his back and unsealed two kunais with seal markings written on them, which he grabbed one for each hand. Looking at Gaara, he watched as he sent sand tentacles towards him. He could see each movement of the tentacle, however it was a lot harder than seeing a human body that had two arms and legs. Dashing to the left, Naruto jumped over two tentacles that were aiming for his stomach. He then jumped on top of a single tentacle and ran along it towards Gaara. Gaara, seeing what he was doing, immediately stopped the sand tentacle before sending all his tentacles right at Naruto, who just jumped on them while gaining a bit closer to Gaara. Naruto, seeing how he was close enough, jumped up towards the sky, blending him in with the sun's shine. Ceiling. 2-point barrier. Throwing the two kunai at Gaara's left and right, he watched as the kunai glowed before having a blue barrier appear around him. Gaara tried to move. He tried to fight the barrier but could only feel himself getting weaker. When Naruto landed, he quickly went through a few hand signs. Ceiling. 5 elemental seal. Screamed Naruto as he charged forward, making sure his barrier ran out of chakra just before he touched it. Naruto watched as his barrier disappeared right when his fingers were a centimeter from it. Seeing how the barrier fell, Naruto pushed his legs a bit harder and rammed his fingers at Gaara's stomach. Even if he didn't hit Gaara's seal, it would knock him out and block him from his Buji and chakra. Naruto watched as Gaara looked at him in shock as he flew towards the arena wall once again as Naruto used too much strength when he thrusted his hand onto Gaara's stomach. Boom! The familiar smashing of a wall was heard by all. Genma, who had decided to check on Gaara's condition slowly, pried the young redhead out of the arena wall. Putting 2 fingers towards his neck to check for a pulse, he was delighted to find Gaara still alive and simply knocked out. The winner is Naruto Uzuma. Genma was cut off from the sound of the cage booth exploding along with nearly everyone in the crowd falling asleep, while the sand shinobi started to attack every leaf shinobi there. Throughout the whole fight, Naruto could make out 3 words. Naruto watched as ninjas sprang into action without thinking and started to fight the Suna and the sound ninjas that had mysteriously appeared once the invasion started. Naruto watched as Temari and her brother Kankuro grabbed Gaara and left towards the village's forests. Boom! Looking up, he saw a purplish barrier arise from out of nowhere. Deciding to get a better view, Naruto sprang off the ground and bounced from wall to wall as he reached the purple barrier. A 4-flame formation if he was correct. Naruto looked at the 4 shinobi holding the barrier. The first one he had seen was a rather fat one. He had orange eyes, and 3 tufts of orange hair on his head in a mohawk of sorts that ran down the middle and 2 similar styled tufts of hair at the side. He wore a sleeveless tunic with the symbol of the sound 4 on the hem, along with black arm warmers, a pair of black 3/4 length pants that stopped just below his knees. Along with this, he wore sandals with leg warmers, covered by bandages, a purple robe belt around his waist, and a necklace that comprised of circular pieces separating long, metallic pieces. The next person he saw was a girl. The most distinctive feature was her long, untamed, red hair. She also wore a black hat with bandaged sides, and she wore a tan tunic, much like the other members of the sound group, with black shorts and standard black shinobi sandals. The then came to a sight of a man with 6 arms. The man was a light brown-skinned shinobi with black, shaggy hair, and black eyes. He wore a black, sleeveless top and shorts, over which he wore a tunic that bore the symbol of a circle, and a purple rope belt around his waist. He also wore the forehead protector of his village along with arm warmers, shinobi sandals and bandages around his legs. The next person Naruto saw was a man with 2 heads, although one of them seemed asleep. The man had straight, dark gray hair with long bangs that covered an eye. From what he could see, the man wore a green shade of lipstick, and had dark markings around his eyes, giving him an androgynous appearance. He wore brown tunics with long black wristbands, black skin-tight shorts, and purple ropes tied around his waist. He also wore a dark red, beaded necklace around his neck and a giant scroll behind his back. Naruto turned his attention to what was inside the barrier and his eyes widened in shock. There was his Jiji fighting Hashirama and Tobirama along with Orochimaru. Naruto had to get in there. He couldn't let his granddad in all but blood fight his senseis. Naruto dashed towards the barrier, ignoring the redhead woman commenting on him being dumb and an idiot. Naruto went through hand signs. Ceiling. Temporal distortion. When Naruto placed his glowing yellow hand on the barrier, he watched as the barrier opened itself up so that it would fit his body, along with someone slightly taller than him. Dashing through the barrier, he ignored the swearing of the redhead girl along with gaping ninjas who had looked to see what he had done. Naruto watched as he moved towards the battle, his Jiji fighting off his senseis. Naruto looked towards Hashirama as he was preparing his chakra for a Mokudan attack. He had to act quickly. Pumping chakra into his body, Naruto dashed straight towards his sensei before a blue fire lit up in his hand. Ceiling. Restriction of the Shinigami. Naruto thrusted his hand into Hashirama's armor as he barreled through the corpse, cutting it in 2 and sending bits of tiny paper-like cells into the air. As Hashirama's body dropped, he quickly sent Naruto a grin before falling face first into the ground, which wasn't a great view for a fight. Naruto landed on a branch that his sensei created with wood release secret technique, Nativity of a World of Trees, which allows the user to summon trees anywhere. This included but not limited to roofs, ocean, walls, metal and many other objects. Naruto snapped his head to the side as he felt a punch to his jaw, sending him through multiple trees and branches. Landing with half his body encased by a tree's base, he looked up to where he was previously standing and had come across Tobirama, his sensei. Forcing himself up, Naruto moved to stand on a single branch before creating 10 cage bushes. Naruto looked towards his clones before pointing towards the direction his Jiji was. Help Jiji, okay. From what I heard, Orochimaru is a sneaky bastard that can get himself out of nearly anything, got it? Said Naruto as he turned back to his sensei, who was simply watching him with a smile. The clones nodded, before dashing towards the Hokage's position. Naruto stared at his sensei with a blank face as his eyes traveled to his surrounding area, preparing to fight his sensei. Tobirama looked at Naruto with a grin. While he couldn't control his body, he could still talk and show emotions. Naruto, I know that my and Hashirama's scrolls, along with Minato's, had been destroyed due to the time seal placed on it, but even though it's only been 10 days since you and my clone had trained, I can tell that you are doing very well. However, you didn't notice me place a genjutsu on you, so I'm sorry, but you are now dead, said Tobirama with his face marrying a frown as he watched Naruto grab his head and fell to the ground with blood pooling out of his head through his ears and closed eyes. And you don't know when it was a Kujibushin in my place, replied Naruto with his hand now shoved through Tobirama's back along with his other hand placing the ceiling restriction of the Shinigami on him. Ripping his hand out from Tobirama's back, he watched as Tobirama fell forward onto the roof tiles that the large amount of trees didn't cover. Naruto looked at his sensei's downed form and gave a small smile, before dashing off to his Gigi's battle as he felt 6 of the 9 he had sent to help his Gigi as he had used one to trick Tobirama, although it was probably Tobirama making his body not react to him switching with a clone. "I'll be seeing ya sensei," muttered Naruto as he left the clearing, not noticing the smile Tobirama had held on his face. Orochimaru and Hiruzen battle. The third Hokage was huffing. He was keeping even with his student Orochimaru, however his aging body will eventually fail him. Hiruzen dodged the incoming snake barrage that Orochimaru sent towards him. He watched as a Naruto clone kicked a stray snake away from him before being dispelled by Orochimaru, who had jumped towards him and sent a neck-snapping kick. Even though Hiruzen knew that it was only a clone of Naruto, seeing his unofficial grandson's neck snap towards you would slightly scare you. Hiruzen quickly spun his adamantine staff in a 360-degree spin, knocking all the other snakes Orochimaru had sent towards him after once again killing another Naruto clone, this time with his Kusanagi blade. Orochimaru grinned as he sliced through the few Naruto clones that had appeared to help Hiruzen. But he did note that the cage bushins did not disappear after he sent Tobirama to kill Naruto. Did Naruto take to hiding? Well, it shouldn't take much longer for Tobirama to kill him. Orochimaru chuckled as he pointed his katana, the Kusanagi blade, at his sensei, manga version of sword. The Kusanagi blade had a standard katana shape. It had black cloth surrounding the handle with white diamonds running along the sides of it. The guard was just a plain gold circle. The actual blade of the Kusanagi was black with a white edge running along the bottom of the blade. "Hiruzen, time to die," said Orochimaru as he dashed towards his sensei with his sword forward, only to get a snapping kick to the back of his head, which sent him flying towards the barrier, only to be saved by one of his snakes he had summoned mid-fight. Orochimaru looked to who had attacked him and looked shocked. There stood Naruto Uzumaki, his green jacket ripped beyond repair along with his black long sleeve having multiple tears running throughout it. "Sorry Orochimaru, but I won't let you kill the Hokage," said Naruto as he started to build up chakra within his coils. "As a shinobi of Konoha, it's my duty to protect the Great Will of Fire. I learnt that from my senseis, and I will be damned if I let their teachings be wasted upon me," said Naruto as he activated his technique. "Flash step," shouted Naruto as he disappeared from everyone's sight. Soon Orochimaru felt a blinding pain in his ribs as he was sent flying from one end of the purple flames formation to the other, however this time he actually hit the barrier. "Ahhhhh!" screamed Orochimaru as he bounced off of the barrier showing his now burned left arm, which had begun to bleed as Orochimaru's arm peeled. Orochimaru looked for Naruto, only to see him on the ground holding his stomach, along with his sensei guarding him. Hiruzen moved as soon as he saw Naruto fall to his knees and grab his stomach. "Naruto, my boy, are you okay?" asked Hiruzen as he kept his eyes on Orochimaru, who had started to look towards them. Naruto huffed and he tried to draw chakra out of Hashirama's trees. He knew that his technique, which was just an upgraded Shunshin, had not been tested in the field, but he didn't think that the effects would be this bad. He hadn't taken into the account of the uneven flooring, which had forced him to change directions several times within his single flash step. "Yay, I'm fine, just going to have to gather some chakra. You wouldn't have a chakra pill on you?" asked Naruto as he watched his Gigi drop a single pill onto a tile in front of him. Nodding gratefully towards his Gigi, he swallowed the pill and instantly felt his chakra start to return. He was definitely going to get put into the hospital for chakra exhaustion. Standing up, Naruto quickly flared his chakra to start healing his minor wounds at a faster rate as he already had Kyuubi's chakra healing him. Naruto looked towards Orochimaru, noticing something that he didn't notice before while he was gathering some chakra. The Kusanagi wasn't in Orochimaru's hand. Naruto heard a swish behind him and widened his eyes. The Kusanagi blade was flying towards his Jiji. Naruto jumped forward and pushed him out of the way, surprising the Hokage as he watched Naruto get the Kusanagi pulled through him. Hiruzen watched as Naruto passed out from the pain of having a sword go through his left shoulder. Orochimaru grew even more pissed. He was aiming for his sensei, but the brat had pushed him out of the way and instead gotten himself stabbed. Orochimaru watched as Hiruzen suddenly started to cough blood out from his mouth. It seemed the Kusanagi blade's poison was finally taking its effect. Hiruzen covered his mouth with a hand as he coughed out blood, which some of it landed on Naruto's face. He was going to die without medical treatment, and if he died, Orochimaru could kill Naruto afterwards. He knew what he was going to do. Looking towards his student, Hiruzen hardened his eyes as he started to go through a chain of hand signs. Looking fiercely towards Orochimaru's eyes, Hiruzen had flashbacks of how his student started and how he had ended, and could only become more determined as he watched through all of the innocent people being used as guinea pigs by him. Orochimaru, too long have I let you live. As my final act of Hokage, I will kill you, by taking you to hell with me, shouted Hiruzen towards the end of his speech as he finished his hand signs. Orochimaru, who had noticed what jutsu used those hand signs, widened his eyes in fear. Throwing the Kusanagi blade towards Hiruzen before he completed the jutsu, he watched as Genma had deflected the katana before dispersing due to limited chakra. Dead demon consuming seal, shouted Hiruzen as the specter of the Shinigami started to appear, before getting feeling someone swapping places with him using the replacement technique. Hiruzen looked towards the Shinigami he had summoned and widened his eyes when he saw the specter's hand being placed through Naruto's stomach. The Shinigami was a translucent giant specter with a demonic visage. It was much larger than an average human, possessing long, shaggy white hair, from which two red horns protrude, and dark grayish-blue colored skin. It is draped in large white garments and carries a set of prayer beads. The Shinigami also had a tanto in its mouth. The Shinigami stared at Naruto with squinted eyes. "Why have you summoned me, human?" asked the Shinigami as he looked towards the blonde child in front of him. He did look familiar though. Naruto looked ahead as he stared into Orochimaru's eyes. "I want to seal Orochimaru into you," said Naruto as he watched the figure look towards Orochimaru and squint a bit harder before opening his eyes back to normal. "Ah yes, the one who avoids me by transferring bodies," muttered the Shinigami. Naruto quickly formed his hands into a certain hand sign, which made the remaining Naruto clones paralyses Orochimaru with multiple seals that he made the clones prepare during his and Hiruzen battle against Orochimaru. Naruto looked towards the Shinigami before nodding. He watched as the Shinigami's ghostly hand shot through him and straight at Orochimaru as he was attempting to move only to fail. As the ghostly hand grabbed Orochimaru and started to pull his spirit out, Orochimaru decided to become a bastard. "I will not die here," screamed Orochimaru as he made his discarded Kusanagi blade once again sail towards Naruto, who had only widened his eyes before feeling the blade punch right through his right lung. Naruto coughed out blood from his mouth as his lung started to fill with blood. Naruto tried to focus on Orochimaru as he used his chakra to pull his being out from him using the Shinigami's hand. However, he couldn't even see Orochimaru now. All he could see was a white blur ahead of him with a blue blur connecting him and the white being, which he knew was Orochimaru. "Come on, Naruto. You can do this," shouted Naruto to himself as he forced his chakra to pull whatever he had latched onto, only to feel his control slip, and instead of pulling out Orochimaru's head, chest and arms, he only managed to pull the arms off him. As the Shinigami went to cut Naruto's soul in half as eat it, he felt something off, before grinning a bit before disappearing, while leaving Naruto's soul intact, although nobody knew that as Naruto just simply fell towards the ground. Orochimaru was livid when he tried to surge chakra to his body. He hadn't felt his arms. All he felt was an unholy pain where his arms were. He then realized what had happened. He lost his ability to use chakra in his arms, he lost his arms. He lost the one thing that mattered to him. His jutsus. Orochimaru was about to have Naruto's head before he felt a chakra surge coming a few feet from him. Turning his head, he was shocked to see what he did. He saw his sensei with nothing but a pure blank expression, although he now had brown pigments going across from his forehead and down the middle of his nose. Hiruzen just looked at Orochimaru's arms as they slowly start to turn purple. Hiruzen slowly turned his eyes towards Orochimaru, who had instantly called the shinobi holding the barrier to help him escape. However, he didn't see Hiruzen smash his face into the ground. Hiruzen looked at his student with nothing for a few moments, before a raging hatred appeared across his features. I was weak, Orochimaru. I was weak for letting you live because you were my favorite student. I had turned a blind eye at your experiments and look what it had cost me later down the road. It cost me my village's people, my likely family, and my UN official grandson. Screamed Hiruzen as he stomped on Orochimaru's back. Hearing a crunch from his ex-student's back, he continued to snap his spine with multiple stomps, before he started to feel the effects from the Kusanagi again. Orochimaru quickly went through some hand signs, ignoring his excruciating pain as it only grew with each second. Finishing his hand signs, he watched as his Sound 4 dropped the barrier around him and Hiruzen before teleporting to him with a shunshin and quickly reverse summoning him and them back to his village. The Anbu stationed around the field instantly tried to give chase to Orochimaru and his ninjas before seeing them disappear. Refocusing on their efforts, they quickly grabbed the Hokage by the arms, only to hear him speak. Grab Naruto Uzumaki's body. If he is somehow still alive, bring him to the Anbu hospital, said the Hokage as he stared towards Naruto's unmoving body for a few seconds before being shunshined towards his personal hospital room that had the best medics in the village working there. One of the few Anbu there walked towards Naruto's still body before placing a hand on his chest trying to see if he was indeed dead. Do bump, do bump, do bump. The Anbu reared his hand back in shock. Naruto Uzumaki was still alive. The Anbu quickly looked towards two colleges of his. Bird, snake. Pick up Naruto Uzumaki and take him towards the Anbu hospital. He is in critical danger right now, his heartbeat very weak, but still there. Said the tiger Anbu as he pointed towards Naruto's prone body, only to hear someone within the group mutter out how they shouldn't save the demon, and just let him die. Tiger turned to the operative and stared at him for a few seconds, before smashing a knee into his gut and knocking him out. Tiger turned back towards the group of Anbu. Go! Screamed Tiger as he watched them start to move. In the arena. In the middle of the arena, there was a puff of smoke. Yo, are we on it? Kakashi stopped as he noticed that no one was there. Blinking to himself, he must have went a day early or something. Turning towards Sasuke with an eye smile, he pointed his thumbs up. Well, Sasuke, looks like we have more time to train. With that, Kakashi grabbed Sasuke by the shoulder before shining back towards his secret training ground. Hospital. Where I thought Naruto as he slowly opened his eyes and instantly covered them due to the brightness. Allowing his eyes to adjust to the brightness within the room, he slowly sat up and looked around, only to come to the conclusion that he was in the general hospital, again. When Naruto tried to stand up, he felt a shock run through his system and a massive pain in his shoulder. Looking down towards his right shoulder, Naruto just stared blankly at the wrappings around his entire chest and stomach. Thinking back to his injuries, he remembered himself taking the Kusanagi through both the stomach and the right lung while helping his Gigi in battle. His Gigi. He passed out before he could help, although he felt something was different within him. Grabbing the edge of his bed, Naruto started to push himself onto his 2 feet. Letting go of the bed, he started to slowly walk towards his hospital room door. Reaching out with his right hand, he grabbed the door knob before slowly twisting it open as his wrist was sore for some odd reason. Sticking his head out, Naruto looked both directions before slowly walking out of his room. When he was younger, If he was caught sneaking out of the hospital, he would have many ninjas throw him back in there under Hokage's orders. It sucked because it was boring in the hospital. Walking down the long walkway, Naruto took a second to look out of the nearby window and watched Konoha shining with just a bit of rubble here and there, although the gates around Konoha was pretty damaged. Turning his head back towards the walkway, he used the wall next to him to support him as he walked through the hallway. Closing his eyes for a moment, Naruto started to sense chakra signatures spread all around the village. Locking onto the largest chakra signature, he opened his eyes and started to walk forward only to see a ninja appear in front of him with a shunshin. The ninja was obviously a woman as her body was amazingly shaped. The most distinguishing feature of the Anbu woman was her long purple hair. The Anbu with a Neko mask looked at Naruto for a bit, before placing a hand on his shoulder and shunshined him towards the Hokage tower. Hokage office. Hiruzen watched as a poof of smoke and leaves appeared in the middle of his office. Once the leaves and smoke cleared, there stood Naruto Uzumaki and Anbu Neko. Hiruzen looked towards Naruto's state of dress, which was just the regular hospital gown that was administered to all patients. He chuckled to himself that Naruto hadn't noticed his dress yet. What the hell? Screamed Naruto as he looked down at himself to see a hospital gown on him. The Anbu Neko's shoulders were moving slightly up and down, giving off that she was laughing slightly. Hiruzen grinned before nodding towards Neko, giving her the order to go back into position. With a replying nod, she jumped into one of the darkened corners and disappeared. Well, she just sat there. Hiruzen stood up while holding his right hip slightly as he walked towards Naruto. When he reached Naruto, he wrapped him up in a hug, which Naruto returned. When the hug stopped, Hiruzen clicked his fingers and a replica of Naruto's new cloths appeared, along with his old jumpsuits. Hiruzen looked towards all the ceilings and nodded, making the 4 Anbu there appear. He then looked back towards Naruto and smiled. Your choice, he said as he went to wait outside the office. Naruto got what he meant. He could become a ninja, or be like he used to be, a clown. It wasn't that hard of a choice. Naruto walked towards his carefully folded replica of his cloths from the Chunin exams final. Quickly putting his black long-sleeve shirt and baggy pants, he looked for the jacket but noticed it wasn't there, along with his fox mask. Walking outside, he saw his Gigi smile, a proud smile at him, and also got 4 nods from the Anbu at his choice. Naruto nodded back towards the Anbu and looked at his Gigi seriously. Where's my jacket and fox mask? Asked Naruto as he watched the Hokage raise his eyebrow at him for that question, as he wasn't expecting Naruto to ask about his fox mask. Hiruzen looked towards one of the Anbu and made a few hand signs behind his back. With a nod from the Anbu, he quickly disappeared to do what his Hokage had told him. Looking back at Naruto, Hiruzen grinned. I don't know Naruto, but would you like to come with me to the council room? Asked the Hokage. Getting a shrug from Naruto, they both began to walk towards the council room, with the Hokage noticing Naruto's slow but easier walk. It seemed that Naruto was healing while walking. As Hiruzen and Naruto were walking, the Hokage turned towards Naruto with a small smile. So, how was training with 3Kage? Asked Hiruzen casually as he saw Naruto widen his eyes to maximum proportion and quickly turn his head towards his Gigi. How? Asked Naruto as he noticed that his Gigi wasn't angry at all, even though he kinda took some things. I saw through the crystal ball of your training at times. Good job, by the way. Maybe in a few years you could actually gain the title of Hokage. Said Hiruzen as he and Naruto walked towards the council room. Naruto looked towards Hiruzen before shagging his now not painfully bad shoulders and upper body. So you know that I stole my parents' scrolls along with going through the forbidden scroll again, right? Said Naruto as he kept looking forward, not noticing his Gigi widen his eyes similar to how Naruto had a few moments ago. Hiruzen was gaping. He thought that Naruto only managed to accidentally get the 3Kages to help him, and that was a shock. He thought that only Minato's scroll would appear if Naruto swiped blood onto the pictures. and now he finds out that Naruto had taken his parents' scrolls and looked through the forbidden scroll again. How did he do that? Finally reaching the council room, Naruto and Hiruzen walked through the door going to the Hokage podium. Hiruzen looked at Naruto for a bit, deciding if he should do what he was going to do. Finally deciding, he looked towards Naruto and grinned. Naruto sit at the Uzumaki clan seat, said Hiruzen, making all the council members look at him in shock. Naruto looked to the seat that was in between the Nara clan head and the Hyuga clan head. Walking towards the seat he sat himself down, ignoring the mutterings around him, although he made the seat a little bigger using his Mokudan, so that he would be able to properly see. Hiruzen nodded towards Naruto, who in turn gave him a thumb up. Hiruzen looked towards the room and started. We are here today to discuss promotions for a few genin who had gone above and beyond what was expected of them. So the names are Shikamaru Nara, Shino Aburame and Naruto Uzumaki. Said Hiruzen. As he tried to start the voting, he was interrupted by a civilian council member. What about Uchiha Asama and my daughter? They deserves the promotion, screamed a banshee or a woman with pink hair and green eyes, similar to Sakura Haruno. Naruto was holding his ears as well as most of the other shinobi, although Naruto and Tsume had the worst of it as their heightened senses picked up on the sound. Hiruzen's eye started to twitch before sighing. And why should I promote Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno? Asked Hiruzen only to regret asking as the woman opened her mouth once again. Because Sasuke is an Uchiha and we need him and the Sharingan back, and my daughter because she defeated a clan child, shouted the copy of Sakura as she slammed her fist down onto the table. Just before Hiruzen could reply, Naruto moved his hand up. Could I place a volume control seal on her? My ears are bleeding along with hers, said Naruto as he tilted his head to the left and spilt some blood onto the Hyuga head, which in turn looked at him in hate. Hiruzen looked towards Tsume and indeed saw that Tsume, the Inuzuka clan head, was indeed bleeding out of her ears from Hikari's voice. Nodding, he saw Naruto disappear and slap a seal on the back of Hikari and then reappear back in his seat. What did you do to me, demon? Said Hikari as she attempted to scream, only to find that she couldn't. At that moment, everyone in the council started to worship Naruto without him knowing, before getting over it. Hiruzen then answered Hikari's previous question. Sasuke doesn't deserve the position as he hadn't even turned up for the Chunin exams and Sakura had drew against a clan child, but that also wouldn't have given her the position of Chunin as Chunin need tact, skill and leadership, said Hiruzen. Okay, now Shikamaru Nara. All 3/4 of the council risen their hands as they had heard he managed to lead a small group of genin to help minimize damage around the academy and prevented the fall of a medical team who were passing by under attack. Next on the agenda in Shino Aburame, said Hiruzen as he watched a quarter of the council put their hands up. It was known that Shino also helped with Shikamaru, just not as much, although most of the medical team did continue living due to a very smart bug clone squad, which was made out to be the medical team. Hiruzen then nodded towards Naruto. And finally Naruto Uzumaki, said Hiruzen as he watched both the shinobi and civilian side of the council didn't raise their hand at all. Naruto looked at them with a little bit of wonder, before shrugging. There was always field promotion or other methods. Hiruzen raised his eyebrow at everyone keeping their hands down for Naruto's promotion, wondering why. He voiced his concern. And why shouldn't Naruto get promoted? Asked Hiruzen as he watched the Hyuga head stand up. From what all his previous record, he was nothing but a prankster and the dead last of his generation. Now while I had indeed seen his Chunin exams fights, they were obviously staged as not even I could defeat Neji that fast. Hiruzen tilted his head before looking towards Shikaku Nara. The man stood up and gave a sigh. Naruto Uzumaki's personality and characteristics don't show a competent leader at all, and he does not show any ounce of tactics, which could get his team killed. Said Shikaku. Hiruzen started to think about how Naruto not only saved them, but indirectly take out their opponent's Jinchuriki and saved him from dying at the hands of his senseis and student. Naruto sighed, Looks like his personality that Tobirama had pointed out was definitely going to haunt him later on in life, stupid sensei knowing everything. Hiruzen then looked towards his ceiling and nodded. He watched as a figure landed straight into the middle of the room. Anbu Tiger, should Naruto Uzumaki gain the promotion of Chunin? Asked Hiruzen as he watched Tiger get ready to talk. Yes, he should. He not only battled and defeated 2 opponents with ease, he also breached a flame formation barrier, which should have burnt anyone to a crisp at contact, and he then helped the Hokage battle weakened versions of Hashirama-sama and Tobirama-sama. Then helped Sandaime-sama with Orochimaru and even took 2 sword stabs from Orochimaru to help Sandaime-sama. Personally, I would just have him join Anbu, said Tiger, as he felt his Anbu commander dragon shake his head in agreement. Gasps were heard throughout the council room. Naruto Uzumaki is an Anbu. What's next? The Sandaime actually accepting? The Sandaime actually thought about it for a moment, before calling the Anbu commander out. Dragon, come out and state whether or not should Naruto Uzumaki join the Anbu Corps, said Hiruzen as he watched his Anbu commander appear within a moment's notice. The dragon Anbu was silent for a few moments before speaking. I think that Naruto Uzumaki should be implemented into Anbu. His skills are quite high compared to how he was 31 days ago, which brings me to wonder what he did. However, I recommend he join Anbu, said the dragon masked man as he then looked towards his Hokage. Naruto was just absorbing it all in. He might get recommended for Anbu, he might be given training for the best of the best. Hiruzen started to think. Anbu wasn't the best for a child, but he knew Naruto would pull through. However, there was the thing about Naruto now being the center of attention after the whole Chunin exams. Maybe, yeah, that could work. As he was about to speak, the Hyuga head Hiashi stood up and slammed his hands down onto the table. This is ludicrous, shouted Hiashi as he looked towards his right, looking straight at Naruto with his Byakugan active. Aren't you taking his personality and mission reports in? He was a problem in everything, and his skills against the 2 previous Kage and Orochimaru. Preposterous. It would be impossible for someone of his caliber to be that good, said Hiashi as he sat back down, ignoring the Hokage sending him a slight glare. Turning back to Naruto, he grinned. From now on I promote Naruto Uzumaki with quote comma dot special Anbu, said the Sandaime Hokage as he stared into his council. Have you finally lost the plot, Gigi? There's no such thing, asked Naruto as he stared at his Gigi with a tilt of his head as he saw his Gigi start to twitch his eye. The Sandaime watched as some of his council started to talk about him behind their hands. The sad part, it was the shinobi who were doing it. Sighing to himself, he started to explain. I had thought of the idea just now, Naruto, so no, I am not losing the plot, as you said. Special Anbu is a rank that would give you both regular shinobi benefits and some Anbu benefits. The benefits would be higher access to missions, better pay, and higher entrance to the shinobi library along with being able to train in Anbu facilities. Your duties, however, will be split between being a regular shinobi and part-time Anbu, understand? Asked Hiruzen as he watched Naruto's face go through several different emotions. The first was shock, then joy, then excitement, then realization, then slight sadness, before it morphed into acceptance, before turning to confusion again. There's a shinobi library? Asked Naruto. Only make the clan heads mentally agree with themselves that Naruto wasn't fit to become a higher rank than Genin. The Hokage nodded with a slight grin. The shinobi library never gained much attention or people, due to it being a library, and so the only ones who really went there were Jonin who were stuck on something and Chunins who wanted to know some things about the previous Jonin exams. Naruto nodded, remembering to check the library out, before staring back at the Hokage with his shining eyes that were brimming with determination. I accept. And I swear as Naruto Uzumaki, as a ninja of Konoha. I will not let anything happen while it is under my watch, said Naruto as he placed a closed fist onto his chest, right where his heart was. Hiruzen nodded before closing the meeting. Naruto's apartment. Asu bored now, Maybe a game of shogi would do. Nah, when I versus a clone it doesn't work out as it always ends with a draw as they were the same person. Maybe some more fuinjutsu practice. Yay, that sounded good, thought Naruto as he opened his fridge and grabbed a sack of mixed barriers that he had found in the forest. Shutting his fridge door and walking towards his living room with a mouth full of mixed barriers. Naruto went towards a small table cupboard and opened the third drawer, which was the lowest one, and pulled out a scroll labeled, Fuinjutsu Studies, Advanced Volume 1 to 10. The book was all about how to start creating, planning your own Fuinjutsu. Currently Naruto was only on the first chapter. Although most people would call Naruto a Fuinjutsu master after seeing how he was able to use Fuinjutsu to 1. Beat Gaara and 2. Break through a flame barrier, he was only a beginner who had finished the beginner book and used his created, chakra density, jutsu to make seals appear anywhere he wanted. Naruto sent some chakra into the scroll and watched as the first volume of the book appeared. Holding the book in his hands, Naruto created 5 cage bushins. Poof, sir, said the cage bushins loudly as they each held their book in a salute. Naruto just had a small sweat drop down the side of his head. They sometimes were too much like his old self. How did anyone put up with him? Okay, so you are all going to read volume 1 while I go and start doing some training. Maybe I might even check the library. So remember to spell when you are able to memorize the entire book. I can still only do this with 5 clones, but I'm sure I will be able to finish the other volumes in week or 2, so get cracking. Said Naruto as he walked towards his front door and opened it just enough for him to walk through. Shutting the door behind him, he looked down to see a box along with some sort of map. Placing the map aside, he opened the box and came to a sight. His fox mask, exactly colored like his old one, white base with red markings and a black nose. Under his fox mask there was his Anbu uniform along with his Chunin jacket. Slipping on his Chunin jacket, he picked up the map before jumping to the roof right across from him. Looking down towards the map, he saw that the map led towards an abandoned sector of the village, which hadn't recovered from Kyuubi's attack, which luckily was at the edge of the village so no one really needed to go there. Reading the map more carefully, he noticed a few words at the bottom of the scroll. Don't get caught. Don't get caught. Anbu, that must be it. The letter was probably directions to Anbu HQ, but they might have changed it so that it was a recruitment test. Naruto looked towards the abandoned sector, and grinned. Well, Anbu, game on, said Naruto before jumping towards the abandoned section of the village. Council room. What? Shouted Kakashi as he looked at the Hokage and the council. He had just found out that he had missed an invasion and that Naruto would no longer be a part of Team 7, due to getting a special promotion. Kakashi was in shock right now. He thought that the Chunin exams would go for at least 3 hours, but apparently Naruto had defeated Neji so quick and everyone else had simply surrendered. But what about Sasuke? You all know that he would have won his match, said Kakashi, trying to have his most successful student turn into a Chunin so that he could have Sasuke as an apprentice, as he thought Naruto's promotion was just something the Hokage told Naruto to keep him happy. Hiruzen looked at Kakashi with a disappointed stare. Here he was trying to get Sasuke promoted and was ignoring Naruto and his other student. Kakashi. Get out, end of discussion. Sasuke Uchiha will not get promoted. This council meeting is dismissed. Secret training area. Flash step. Throughout the clearing there were multiple flashes of gold before it finally stopped in the middle of the clearing. Huff, 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 okay, so making chakra into a physical form is taxing, while the actual travel isn't all that much. Maybe I could make a seal that condenses air molecules, so that I don't have to huff, huff, summon chakra into a dense physical layer under my feet each time while in the air, muttered Naruto to himself as he was trying to finish his flash step and make it more reliable instead of just a few steps. Lying on the ground, Naruto opened his Chunin vest and grabbed the Anbu HQ map and looked at it. It was simple and straight to the point. Get to the objective without being caught. And he had a time limit of 5 days. How did he miss the time limit? Naruto moved the scroll onto the grass beside him as he looked towards the clear blue sky, letting all his chakra flow through him. Shutting his eyes, Naruto focused on the life around him, feeling each and every living thing within the forest and river. Suddenly, Naruto felt something else along the creatures around him. It felt pure like nature itself. The energy was floating all around him and even under him. Drawing the energy, he felt peace overcome his senses, before snapping out of it when he opened his eyes to see a small fox jump on his stomach. Scratching the little fella behind the ears, he watched as it yipped at him, before running off towards the forest. Naruto then thought back to the feeling he felt, the peace he felt when he absorbed some of the energy. Was that what peace would feel like? Would everyone have a chance to feel like that sometime in their life? Could that feeling be shared by everyone? Naruto held onto the feeling he had felt for a few moments before standing up and grabbing his scroll. If peace truly felt like that, then everyone should be able to feel it, thought Naruto as he started to walk towards the abandoned section of Konoha. An hour later we find Naruto standing just before the abandoned area. Naruto closed his eyes as he felt chakra signatures in front of him by a few meters. Naruto moved his chakra around for a bit before releasing a breath and opening his eyes. Then he disappeared, shocking the hidden Anbu as they saw nothing but a flash before he disappeared. When Naruto reappeared, he had landed on top of a small building. Moving his hand towards the wall to his right, he started to send chakra pulses through the stone wall. He could have used his sensory abilities, but it required him to focus and remain still as it is not trained enough. Sure, he could use it to sense a mile radius, but he hadn't had any training that lets him use it subconsciously and on the run. Feeling through the wall to Anbu, who had seemed to shuffle slightly when he sent the chakra pulse. He knew that they could instantly teleport to the HQ and report that he was here since the test had started when he entered. Naruto came to one conclusion: to knock them out. Now Naruto wasn't stupid anymore. He knew that if he fought two Anbu head-on he would be killed or defeated almost instantly. So Naruto decided to use a new technique he had created called phase, which, like the title of the name, allows him to phase through any solid object. However, this would alert any sensor Anbu within the area if he took too long. However, due to his chakra blanketing a good 50 or so meters, it would take them a while to find him. Naruto started to send chakra through his body, and then started to make his chakra move faster and faster within himself. Reaching an extremely high chakra velocity, Naruto made all that chakra come to the surface. If people saw Naruto now, they would only see his general shape as his body was vibrating at an astonishing rate. Naruto walked towards the wall, before simply passing through. The way this technique works is vibrating himself so that he could go through any surface as long as he was vibrating at his current rate. Tobirama had said that it was due to the phenomenon called quantum tunneling. A side effect from vibrating his body fast was the fact that he could also move at an insane speed, although that depleted his chakra at a very fast rate. The most he could run with the speed he gains from the technique was 5 seconds, although he managed to travel from Konoha to all the other major villages. But when he had returned, he passed out for a few days. Naruto looked at the two Anbu, who had not noticed him behind them, as he was now pure kinetic energy for the next few seconds as he stopped pumping chakra into himself to keep his vibration. Moving his hands, he sent the two Anbu into the ground as he hit every pressure point and paralyzing point in their backs, although they should be up in a few minutes. Naruto looked at his body as it stopped vibrating at an insane rate. Forcing chakra around his body, he started to calm his raging heart. Another side effect from the vibrations, he could gain a heart attack at any moment while vibrating at that speed. However, he would have been dead if not for Kyuubi's chakra strengthening his heart when he was younger, along with keeping it from exploding. This goes the same for any organ or limb he had. Puffing out some air, Naruto leaned against the wall to his left and sent another chakra pulse that ran throughout the entire abandoned part of Konoha. Ping! He felt something within a hidden building a few feet under the current house he occupied currently. Naruto looked at himself for a second, before once again forcing his chakra into vibrating at an insane rate. He felt his reserves plummet rapidly as he stopped and pushed his chakra through his body. Naruto knew that if he kept going at this vibration speed, he will pass out. Naruto forced his feet to start to penetrate the ground below him, and as if like magic, he started to phase through the ground. Naruto watched as he went through a few floors and finally land on a metallic platform. Closing his eyes and spreading his senses, he quickly noted that there was a single signature right in front of him. Opening his eyes, he widened them in shock when he came face to face with a yellow gas cloud. Thud. Naruto's body fell down hard against the metallic floor. The man in front of Naruto's body was none other than Dragon, the Anbu commander. Dragon stared at Naruto's prone body for a few seconds, before clicking his fingers, summoning two Anbu. Neko and Tiger appeared, and saluted. "Sir," said both Anbu as they looked towards their commander. Dragon looked at them for a moment, before staring back at Naruto's prone body. "How did he do?" asked the commander as he looked towards his two Anbu with a tilt of his head. Neko stepped forward. "He did very well, for a likely recruit. He had only set off 2 out of the original 200 silent alarms and only alerted the 2 Anbu who were knocked out, so overall he did this almost perfectly," replied Neko as she looked towards Naruto's still prone body, with some thoughts running through her head. The commander nodded, before walking away. "Bring him to his next test," said Dragon, before walking away towards his office. Neko and Tiger nodded to each other before grabbing Naruto's body and shining to Naruto's next test.